Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be trying to replicate the graphic that pops up when you open the Canon EOS software. It's a very moody image. I love it, but it's a illustration. It's CGI. It can't be done in camera. So I have borrowed a friend's 5DS. I've lit it with a 3-light setup, and this is what we've got coming out of the studio. Let's jump into Photoshop and see how we manage to turn it into this. Hey guys, we're back in Photoshop and I'm just going to give you a walkthrough of the layers that make up this image. Now this is what I had in mind. I see this every time I open the Canon EOS utility and I love it, but it is an illustration or a CGI. It's not something that I can easily duplicate in the camera because it's not a real object. So I've gone into the studio. We're currently in the midst of the Corona lockdown in the UK, so I've got time on my hands. And I thought I would give it a go and see what I could come up with in the studio. So I'm going to walk you through the layers starting from a blank canvas. We have got a solid black layer, another solid black layer with a gradient overlay applied to it, and it's been set to... Oh, I thought I would have set that to lighten. I think the reason I've not set it to lighten is because there was no need. So I've basically just masked this off. You can see there's my mask. Nothing clever going on here at all. But on my screen, when I look at it here, I can clearly see some banding. Even though it's a 16-bit image, I've got some banding. It doesn't look great. So I've added some grain. If you've seen any of my walkthrough videos before, you'll know that's a thing. So here's my grain. It's a solid grey layer. It's been set to overlay. Sometimes soft light is a little bit more subtle. In this case, I really wanted to throw some noise at it. So this is medium grey layer, mid grey layer with noise filter, just set to monochromatic and tinkered with until I felt it was about the right kind of grain to suit my camera. And then set to 60% opacity, so it's pretty subtle, but it's just there to break up the banding in the image and get rid of any artifacts that we might have. Might look a bit weird on YouTube. I'm not sure whether or not the resolution is going to show you what I'm seeing there, but if you're doing any gradient work using Photoshop's built-in tools to draw gradients, you're probably going to see some banding even at 16 bits. That is a great method for taking care of it. Okay, right, let's actually have a look at the product. This is what happens when I fire all of my lights simultaneously. And it's obviously far too light for what I want. It's not a bad picture, but it's not what I'm after. So let's get rid of that, actually. Before I move on, I'll just show you this. This is my solar layer, and you can see this solar curve is bringing out all of this stuff that you couldn't see otherwise. So this is a great tool to have knocking around. It's just a standard curve, so I've not done anything to it apart from draw this really crazy curve. And what it does is just acts as a visualization tool and allows me to see stuff that I might not otherwise pick up on. I'll get rid of that too. Okay, so what have we got going on here? We've got lit from the top. This is called top light. It's actually top and back, so it's probably about 12 inches behind the subject. It's a beauty dish with a grid. Now, you don't have to use a beauty dish. You could use any modifier as long as it's gridded. The grid is what I was interested in. I just happen to have a nice tight grid on my beauty dish, so made a really good light source. It's set behind the subject, so only the spill, the light from the very edge of the dish, is trickling over the top of the object. And this light gave me everything I wanted on the day. I could have just taken this picture and come home, but it's not a great picture, is it? I mean, it's the closest that we're going to see today to the illustration on the opening screen of the EOS software, but it's not a great photograph. So let's add some fill. This just gives me the actual shape and the fact that it's really a camera. Now this is a roll of tracing paper suspended across the front from literally touching the top of my lens and diagonally at 45 degrees above the subject with a strobe firing directly into the center. So very, very gradated, very soft light. Loved this. Absolutely loved this. There's no way I could have predicted that, because obviously you couldn't see that with the naked eye. It's only when the flash fired into the glass that I got this highlight from the lens coating. So I have I've set this, my original layer is just a normal layer, set to normal. This one is set to lighten, so only the lighter pixels will come through, and I've then duplicated it and masked in just the lens. So only the white area in this mask is visible. If you don't understand much about masking, I will do a masking tutorial in the next week or two, so make sure you subscribe and I'll run you through a couple of masking techniques that can help you out. So this is also set to lighten, and it's an additive effect. So basically we're just adding more light pixels on top of the light pixels we've already got, just to really bring out that highlight in the glass. And finally, also set to lighten at 65%, we've just got this highlight drawn down the side of the object. So that is my actual I was going to say straight out of camera, but you know, we fooled around with 3 exposures in Photoshop, but they're basically straight out of camera, no editing. Now, the main issues that I've got here are that this is way too coarse. There is some blistering in the paintwork, not that anyone's ever going to blow it up this large, it's going on my website, but it's still not acceptable to me. And we've got this mark on the lens. I'm not even sure what that is. The lens is impeccably clean. Come on. I'm a bit OCD about my equipment, so I would never allow a smear like that on my lens. Anyway, regardless, let's fix it with frequency separation. I'm going to very quickly talk you through my frequency separation setup. I've got low median, so my low frequency layer is done with medium blur in this case. So there's my median blur. And if you're not sure about the benefits of frequency separation, what's essentially going on is we're separating the low frequency, which is just this blurred image. It's just the tonal range. There's no detail here at all. So we've got that in a single layer here. I've duplicated that layer and then clipped it to the one below. So if I turn this one on and off, you can see the original still residing underneath. So that gives me a non-destructive workflow. I'm going to work on this layer, and if I mess anything up, I can copy the information back from the original into this layer, or just throw this away and start again. So I'm never getting to a point where I can't revert. Now I've done a similar thing with my high median. Now I always call it high median. Sorry guys, it's because I've used median blur. If I've got, if I do it with Gaussian blur, this would be called low Gaussian, and that would be called high Gaussian. So this is actually my high frequency layer, isn't it? So if I solo this up for you, you'll see it looks very similar to what you would get if you ran the high pass filter for your sharpening. And essentially it is exactly that. It's a mid-gray layer with some white pixels and some black pixels to add contrast. It's set to linear light, and it's basically adding the detail back into my image again. So if I turn this on with just the original high median layer, especially if I turn off this worker layer, if I turn my frequency separation on and off, you should see no difference at all. But then once I've done the work on the low median, you'll see the blur move away. Oh, I think actually there was an edge there that actually snuck through into my high frequency layer. Can you believe that? Okay, and when I add in the high frequency layer, you'll see I have just taken care of the texture, but left the tonal values intact. So we've still got this highlight moving across the front of the branding here, but I've sampled the texture from elsewhere on the body and cloned it in with the clone stamp. Now, this is the original. It's a bit too coarse up here for me as well. So this was really easy. I've just copied some of the texture from directly above and cloned it directly in below. So the very top of the camera, I'm really happy with. But I couldn't find a texture that was the right texture for this area here. Now over here, I've just taken off some of the hotspots. So basically cloning pixels from right next door to the pixels that you see popping in and out. But yeah, I needed to do this whole area, and there wasn't a texture that was really the right texture for me to do that. So what I ended up doing is cloning it out with a softer texture and then copying the original high frequency layer above my work, masking it, and then just blending it back in again. So it's currently 59% is unacceptable to me. It's 60%. It's currently at 60%. So that gives me a nice sort of mid ground between being too flat and 2 coarse. So without the high frequency work, it's this. With the work that I've done, it's this. So it's kind of like a halfway point. And that is the end of our frequency separation and our sort of product retouching. Above that, all we've done is taken this mask. Ask me how I did that mask. I'll tell you in another tutorial. So this was a super easy mask to make. It looks pretty accurate, but very, very easy. All we've got here is a curves layer with a little bit of a push just to make the Canon branding pop a little bit. So that's nice and bright. We've added a little bit of additional pop to the lens. Again, copied the same mask as we used before. So this is only applied to the areas that are white in the mask. So only the lens is affected by this, and it's just a boost in saturation and a slight boost in lightness, just to give us a bit more pop. And then finally, we've got a color balance layer here. Midtones are left neutral, but my shadows have got +2 blue, -2 cyan, and then the highlights are the opposite. And the reason for that is simply blue's cool, isn't it? Blue's cool. So it's very, very subtle. You've got to keep your color balance. If you do any color work at the end of your edit, it's got to be subtle. Like, you don't really want to be pushing these sliders, you know, blue. It will look a mess. So yeah, 2 as opposed to 53. 2 is a good value. So there's my color balance. On this occasion, if you see any of my other image walkthroughs, you'll see that I would always finish by adding a levels layer and checking the output. So to do that, I'm going to hold down Alt and slide my black slider this side to just make sure that some of my pixels are solid black. Well, there's a lot of solid black there, isn't there? So I really don't need to do that. Same thing on this side. If I hold this side and bring it in, I can make sure some of my pixels are solid white. Now, if I make that Canon solid white, it just pops a little bit too much for me. So I decided not to bother. And this is the first time in my memory that I can remember not bothering to do that. Now, I'm currently using the full dynamic range of this image, bar 1 or 2 pixels. So I'm more than happy with this. I hope that was useful for you guys. I did shoot a behind the scenes, like a lighting tutorial about how this was lit, but ironically, I wasn't happy with how the tutorial was lit. So I'll work on my lighting in the studio. We've got a really big studio and it's quite difficult to light everything and make it look nice. I can make it look awful and have everything really flat and really evenly lit, so you can see it just by affecting the exposure of my camera, but it looks really, well, it doesn't look great. So I will be going into the studio and doing some lighting stuff. I've got a few things up my sleeve, but I've just got to work a little bit on lighting setup in the studio. So I'll get back to you on that. For now, anyway, this is a 3-light setup, lit from above, lit from behind, and a gradiated fill across the front. And yeah, as I said, there will be videos coming in the very near future for masking, advanced pen tool, which everybody hates, I believe. I hated it. And also advanced frequency separation. So if you're interested in any of those topics and you think it might help your Photoshop work, then just subscribe, hit the little bell icon, the notification icon, and you'll find out for yourself when I post my next video. Okay, nice one, guys. Thanks for your time.